Alright guys, this is actually a video I made and I'm commentating. So I got the gearbox open and what I'm showing here is the screws that were stripped. I colored them green with a permanent marker. That way I can tell the difference which ones are stripped or not when I have to come back to the tool I need. I found the real hammer that I needed. I had a crappy one earlier and I couldn't get to open the gearbox, but I found another hammer. So this was the next night, and I had this hex that I hammered right into the screw so I could pull it out, and it worked fairly well, and it got it off. Um, Going through the gearbox, I found a few other problems, a few other issues. One being, we'll see the compression is horrible, and number two, the trigger contacts. Originally I thought there was a wire problem, but you'll see that it's a trigger contact instead. And now from unscrewing this, I'm going to put the screws into a bag so I don't lose them. Now if it wasn't the screw, but it was the screw hole, I'd outline the screw hole green or something so I'd know that that's an issue right there and come back to it. You can see I take very good care in my weapons, and I really do work on them. Also, going through some of the other weapons that I've had to tonight, I went back to the KWA to see if it was working the way it was supposed to. Got into the hop up and found out that the hop up actually should probably be replaced. A piece of it does not move the way it's supposed to. There's too much silicone spray. I didn't spray anything in it, but from previous user, I guess too much silicone spray, but at the same time that makes it worse is that the hop up rubber, I call it a rubber wheel, but it doesn't move very well through the hop up. It's too tight, and because of that it gets stuck, and so the hop up on the KWA kind of blows. It doesn't work. Oh, I have shaved my head if you're wondering what's up with that. So I'm putting all the pieces back in here, and the KWA hop-up I think is going to have to be replaced. I've tried a couple of the different hop-ups, and I've noticed that they don't have a tight fit, and even without the silicone spray, they work fine, so that I think the KWA's hop-up is going to have to be replaced. And talking about the KWA hop-up, it is a two-piece hop-up, but it does look like you can remove it. I see some screws, and I removed out part of it. So I'm going to assume you can put a one piece in there. I haven't really tried, but it looks like exactly same fittings. I looked at it very closely, and I could suggest, right away, this will fit, or I'll make it fit pretty easily. Now here's how you open the gearbox. You got to put a screwdriver at the back end and lift up towards the back end first to decompress the spring, and slowly let the spring out in the back end. While doing this, what happens is none of the springs will shoot out, even the anti-reversal latch, the trigger, and so forth. And you can see I pull it over. There's a ton of grease, and at the spot that I suppose that there was a shimming problem, it seems that there is. Somebody put too many shims on that spot, and then at one spot it doesn't even have any shims, which I found very weird. So I'll have to go back and adjust that, but I have to buy parts first to fix what I want to do. So this is the Combat Machine gearbox, and right away I start pulling out parts and looking them over, and you can see I'm very careful. And I look at the piston head. Piston head has a couple holes. It's ported, and it's just grease on it. I mean, it's just a normal piston head with a piston and spring. So I set those aside. They're very greasy, a little too much grease. And then I'm going to move out to see the next, the cylinder and the cylinder head, and check compression with the front nozzle. Here I am taking out the gears to kind of check it. I'm trying to see if there's a shim on it, because it looks like there is, but it's not. It's made that way. So for whatever reason, it's not shimmed what it looks like properly. So I'll set that to the side. Looking at all the gears, they do look in fine condition. What else? Let's see. We're going to be talking about the wires pretty soon. I usually talk to myself a little too much before I move on to the next step. But I'm just checking the trigger right here. I'm kind of, or excuse me, the gears. I'm kind of seeing how they move. And the anti-reversal latch, I didn't even talk about. The anti-reversal latch is very weak. The spring on it is horrible. It can cause a jam pretty easily because that thing does not move very well. It doesn't move very fast. So what's going to happen is it moves very slow. So that's one big issue that should probably be replaced. I had forgotten about that when I went on Airsoft Answers to say, some of these issues. It's good to have a video because then you can go back and watch it. And this is exactly that. That if you're going to have a lot of jamming, you're going to know that anti-reversal latch is not made to work very well. The spring on it is horrible. If you replace the spring, you will have no issue there. And it's just simply that, a cheapy spring. I walked away to get a towel because that stuff is really greasy. There's grease in places that you don't need grease on a reversal latch. You don't need grease all over the gears in certain sections. You just need it where the gear turns on the gear teeth, and it doesn't need to be everywhere. It's the same thing as when I pulled out the hop up for the KWA. There was silicone spray everywhere. It was like too much spray. And when I'm building these hop-ups, I'm starting to realize I don't think you really need that much spray, because when you do, sure, it gets on the BB, but what happens is it touches that that little hole that holds the rubber. I'm forgetting the name of it, but this little rubber wheel, if it gets silicone on it, it just doesn't move properly because it makes it stick to the hop-up, and that's a problem. So you really don't want to put silicone spray there, and that's why people were saying, well, you have to shoot so much before it starts working, simply because it's making it stick to the hop-up and not doing its job. Alright, so I moved the pieces back in there, and I'm checking the wire because I know the wire hasn't been working for some reason. When I pull the trigger, it's not shooting. So what you're going to find out really soon is very interesting. And there's a couple ways to fix this, or you can just buy new trigger contact with wires on e-bike. They're about $28, which would be a lot better than what this is here, instead of having to go through the issues of fixing the wire and then at the same time trying to solder on it. So, and if you want to get it cheaper, you get it from eHobby Asia. So I'm taking off the spring right now to the Tappet plate, doing very carefully, just taking it apart. You can see I just pull off that Tappet plate so I can check the compression now. Pull it out, and I couldn't believe this. First off, it's the cylinder and cylinder head are like glued together. They're like a one piece, and usually the ones I've seen, this is kind of a cheap route, but it's not usually put together like that so that air can escape a little bit. It helps to keep it from breaking down. Also, you can see there is zero compression. Absolutely zero. And when I mean that, there's nothing. You can see there's absolutely nothing. Without compression, your FPS will be very low, and this would probably be about anywhere between 200 to 300 low. I mean, you can see there's absolutely no compression. There's nothing. So that whole cylinder set's going to have to be changed out. I'm looking at a Garter cylinder set for $59, enhancement set, and it will have better compression than this. This has absolutely nothing. Maybe if I change the O-ring, it will be better. Maybe that's the only thing that needs to be changed. I'm not sure because I don't have O-rings to check and see the differences between them. But I'm going to go ahead and get a whole new set because I assume that the piston is not the right size, and that's going to be issued later. So it's better just to go ahead and buy a whole enhancement set, and when a gearbox breaks down, I'll figure that out later. There's a lot of grease. There's just grease on everything, and it's really just something that has to be usually wiped down. Looking at the gears are all fine. I hear something in the background, but I can't tell what it is. I hear a bunch of rattling. But I don't think that's in the video. That's me right here. Anyways, going back to the video, there's just so much grease and taking out the gears. Now I'm going to look at the contact, and I'm looking at the trigger, and the trigger, it has to be pulled pretty hard. I'm noticing. I'm looking at it and going, just interesting. And you guys can tell I have a lot of common sense. Also, I show to the camera which way it goes. That way, when I put it back together, I can view the video and say, hey, oh, that's how it went. Very easily to put it back together. You can see I show in the camera, okay, it goes that way, the spring and the gear. And so it'll be no issue. But usually I can always tell which way it goes anyways. Just as I took the dust cover off another receiver and put it on another one, and the correct way, it was backwards for some reason. It was pretty easy to fix. Just took a little time. And I'm just getting more of this grease off. Hands are real greasy, so it makes it hard to work. As you can see now, I'm going to get down to the trigger contact and try to figure out why the wire is not working. I'm looking at the cutoff lever, and I'm just like, I'll take this out, and I'll move on the next step. And I try to take off the selector switch plate, but it doesn't seem to be coming out very easily. I'm not going to try to force it, simply because the selector switch plate is fine. It's not in bad condition. It's in great condition. Leave it alone, you know, if something's working. So I'm just showing again how the cutoff lever should be. And there you go. So talking about this again, the two issues that we have found out for the Combat Machine series, number one being the anti-reversal latch, number two being the cylinder's compression. With the piston, is just no compression. And number three now, we're moving on to find out that the trigger contact is not working properly, simply because it's too short, or the spring is too powerful, so it pulls it away too hard. Because of that, you have to pull the trigger really hard to get it to touch the plates together, these little metal contacts. So you can see that you can't really make the spring weaker, simply because it has to fit on there a certain way. But what you can do is extend the metal of the contacts, make them closer. That's kind of a cheapy way to do it. But as these wires suck really bad, it's almost just a better idea to just replace the whole unit and get a new trigger contacts with wires. That's why I said evike.com. Go get the King Arms trigger contacts. You can get it to the rear or to the front assembly, either one. They're about $28 and cheaper on eHobby Asia, but you probably want to buy a couple things from eHobby Asia for the shipping. That way you get your money's worth. And I think that's where I'm going to buy some of my parts from eHobby Asia, which they really ticked me off. eHobby Asia, their customer service and everything, fine. They do. I have never had a problem with them, other than I just think whoever changed the website was an idiot. It's no longer ehobbyasia.com. It's shop.ehobbyasia.com. I didn't order from them for 2 weeks because of that, so they lost out on some money on me, and that was some idiot. You don't change the domain, and there's no warning before that happened. I went to that website many times. Sure, I could have looked up online, why is eHobby Asia not working? But I just assumed that the site was down. Most people would probably assume the same thing. So here I am taking off some more of the shimming. And you guys can see that working on the inside of a gearbox is not difficult at all. In learning how the thing works, it comes to your advantage because you can fix a lot of everything that happens to your gun and upgrade your gun very easily and make your gun work. Because every time I buy a new gun and I look over it, there's always some issue that it just makes me go, what the hell? They can't fix this properly. They can't make it properly. So there's the cutoff lever, which I'm going to take out. And see, I'll try to take off the selector plate, but I'm like, oh, this is not moving, but I don't want to push at it. There's no point. I'm just going to leave it there. So I look at it for a little bit longer, then I'm like, no, never mind. It's just going to stay. And then going to move probably to the trigger now and figure out the wire. I'm going to get out my little connectivity wiring kit, or set, I guess it is. Just check the line. I thought there might be a cut in the line that made it bad, but there really wasn't. It just comes down to those contacts. That middle to middle is not touching when you pull that trigger. You have to pull it so hard. So here we go. I'm going to check for the light. I love this gadget. I read about these all the time, and I've been using the multimeter. But I decided, it'd be so much easier than the multimeter. And when I got my hands on one, I gotta say, definitely pretty much a must. See right there, the light's showing. So I could tell the wire went to the trigger contact, but on the other side it was not, because the trigger is not being pulled, of course. I knew that much. So I had to look at it and say, okay, once we pull these, I should get a light up at the other side, but how come I didn't before? So I'm going to push this a little bit forward and check it all the way through. See, now it's starting to show. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's what I thought. It's exactly what I thought, see? So I'm like, the wiring is fine. It's the fact that the trigger contacts do not push far enough forward to touch each other. And again, this is probably because of the spring. It's just so powerful. It's pulling it back. And maybe the trigger doesn't move so far forward. It only moves so much. So it's an issue that will just have to be replaced probably. The wiring is really thin anyways. I would just replace it, because if you do anything wrong, you're going to cut that wire. And not only that, the thicker the wire is, the better the gun is going to shoot. It's just way too thin in my opinion. When I look at it, I'm going, what the freak? This is thinner than anything I've ever seen for airsoft. So that was me talking about the contacts. And if you do solder on some metal, it's going to have to be pretty big, because you want it to be about the size of that height of the contact. You can't say width, because it would be as long as the width of the contact. You need the height of the contact. That way when it touches, you're getting just enough power to make that semi-automatic. They have just the right amount. So you need to be equivalently that if you're going to do that. Otherwise, just buy the new wiring set, like I said, from King Arms would be better. And King Arms is a pretty trustworthy brand for internals. So go ahead and start to finish that. I'm also going to talk about the KWA. All three of these Airsoft Project guns, they had inner barrels that were cut previously by, looked like a hacksaw, but the person cutting them, or if it was even different people from the time, they weren't actually filed properly. And sometimes there were shavings that I didn't even, before I started filing, there's stuff inside the barrel. And when you go to shoot, if there's anything inside the barrel, those barrels are really tight with the BBs. Those BBs will knock them or rub against them, and then your accuracy is going to be off. So they have to be cleaned. But at the same time, the end of the barrel is cut, and the way it's cut, there's little metal shavings going into the barrel right there. So it has to be filed and removed. It's kind of just dirty work. Basically, I don't know why somebody would just hacksaw it and then just, oh, it's good to go. It needs to be properly hacksawed and filed. So here we go with the contacts. See right here, I got to pull that thing really far forward. I'm not sure, it looks like it touches way before that, but if you look at the front of that gold contact, it actually is bended outwards, which means it doesn't touch as close. You can see that. It has to go in between two metal contacts, the gold ones right there. So as it goes between them, then it eventually touches in the middle. So maybe another idea is you could bend those gold contacts down and they would touch the metal sooner. But again, you shouldn't have to do any of these things. If someone's building this gun at G&G and a combat machine, they should know that these issues are very small, something that's not really hard to fix, but they're still making the issue. They're just making a problem and still shipping them out. So I mean, they could fix these pretty easily and stop the problem, making the combat machine even more worthy of a weapon. You can see right there, it works, but I have to pull that trigger all the way down. See, you have to pull it tight. It shouldn't be as tight as that. I'm pulling it so tight to the end. See, I'm showing if I barely pull it, like even pretty close, it still doesn't go off. Got to pull it all the way. So those are the issues right there. Pretty much, I haven't seen the hop of a combat machine just because I don't have it. But I'll catch you guys later and hit you with the fist. Bump. See you. Good night.